husband texted me that he was leaving me, generously left me some money. But I had a plan. The text arrived between client consultations at my design studio. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with Alexis. I've already emptied our joint account. Sorry it had to end this way. My hands didn't shake as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I helped Mrs. Donovan select fabric swatches for her living room remodel. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just nuked our marriage via text message was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Donovan left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper, before checking our joint savings account on my phone. The balance that had shown 278, 543 Tuesday to yesterday money we'd saved for our future. Our retirement, our dreams now read 3,543.26. I took a deep breath and placed my phone face down on my desk. After 12 years of marriage, I had just been dumped by text message. Wade had stolen our life savings to run away with someone named Alexis, and I needed to be at the Henderson consultation in exactly 47 minutes. So I did what any self-respecting 43-year-old woman would do. I finished my afternoon appointments. I smiled at my clients, sketched custom design concepts, and discussed color palettes like my personal life wasn't imploding. Because regardless of what Wade thought, I was a professional. And professionals didn't cancel on clients just because their husbands turned out to be thieving. Cheating cliches. It wasn't until I locked up the studio at 6:30 p.m. that I finally allowed myself to feel something. Not heartbreak or despair, but a cold, clarifying anger that had been building for years. I just hadn't acknowledged it until now. I drove to my favorite wine bar, ordered a glass of Cabernet, and opened my laptop. Then I activated what I privately called Operation Asshole Contingency, a set of legal and financial measures I'd quietly put in place 3 years ago when I first suspected Wade might be cheating. Because here's something Wade never understood about me: I always prepare for the worst case scenario. It's what makes me an exceptional designer. I anticipate problems before they arise. And Wade, with his wandering eyes and suspicious business trips, had become a problem I'd been preparing to solve for longer than he realized. As I sipped my wine and typed in the passwords that would set everything in motion, I couldn't help but smile slightly. Wade thought he'd blindsided me. He thought he'd cleaned me out and left me devastated. He had no idea what was coming. My name is Michelle Reeves, 43, owner of Reeves Interior Design, a boutique firm specializing in high-end residential spaces. I met Wade Crawford when I was 30, and he was 32, both of us ambitious professionals with promising careers. I had just launched my own design business after years working for larger firms. He was climbing the corporate ladder at a financial services company. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and passionate declarations. Wade was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely supportive of my entrepreneurial dreams. Within a year, we were engaged. By year 2, we were married in a tasteful ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, surrounded by friends and family who toasted our perfect match. The first few years were good, or at least, I convinced myself they were good. Wade's career advanced steadily, and my business grew from a one-woman operation to a respected design firm with a small staff and prestigious client list. We bought a beautiful colonial in a desirable neighborhood, took luxurious vacations, and built what looked like an enviable life together. But around year 5, things began to shift. The changes were subtle at first, Wade working later, business trips growing more frequent, his attention during our conversations becoming increasingly divided. He developed a sudden interest in fitness, overhauled his wardrobe, and started making comments about feeling young again. I dismissed the warning signs, chalking them up to a classic midlife recalibration. We were both busy professionals. It was natural that our relationship would evolve. And if I occasionally found receipts for dinners I hadn't attended or smelled unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, well, I had design projects to focus on, clients who needed me, a business to run. It was easier to ignore the obvious than confront what it might mean. By year 9, the evidence was harder to dismiss. A text message that flashed on his phone while he was in the shower, a mysterious weekend conference, where the hotel had no record of the event, the growing emotional distance between us, evident in the way he no longer shared details about his day or asked about mine. That's when I created my contingency plan, not out of vindictiveness, but self preservation. I didn't want to believe Wade was cheating, but I wasn't naive enough to leave my future unprotected. I consulted a divorce attorney who specialized in high net worth separations. I began documenting suspicious expenses and unexplained absences. I moved a portion of my business earnings into a separate account, and I started paying closer attention to our finances, including the joint savings account that Wade, as the financial expert in our relationship, had primarily managed. What I discovered was disturbing. Small transfers moving from our joint account to Wade's personal account, investment decisions made without my knowledge, loans taken against our home equity that I hadn't approved. When confronted, Wade had plausible explanations for everything: market opportunities that required quick action, accounting errors that would be corrected, temporary transfers to manage cash flow. I chose to believe him because the alternative meant acknowledging that the life we'd built was a facade. But I didn't stop preparing, quietly strengthening my financial position while presenting the united front Wade seemed so invested in maintaining. For 3 more years, we continued our elaborate charade of marital solidarity, attending friends' dinner parties, hosting holiday gatherings, planning future renovations to our home, all while Wade's deceptions grew bolder and my contingency plans grew more detailed. I never expected him to end things by text message, though, even after everything, I had given him more credit than that. My second glass of wine arrived as I finished activating my contingency measures. First, I'd contacted our bank to report unauthorized transfers and freeze what remained in our joint accounts. Then I'd emailed my attorney the documentation she'd need to file for divorce first thing in the morning. Finally, I'd initiated the process to freeze our joint credit cards and home equity line. My phone buzzed with Wade's incoming call, the first direct communication since his text 6 hours earlier. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Michelle, what the hell? The cards aren't working. Did you do something? Call me back immediately." His voice held the familiar note of entitled indignation that had become his default in recent years, as if any inconvenience to him was a personal affront. I deleted the message without responding and turned back to my laptop. My next steps required focus. From my records, I knew Wade had transferred $275,000 from our joint savings to his personal account earlier that day. What he didn't know was that I had documentation proving those funds included my business profits that I'd contributed to our joint savings, inheritances from my parents that were legally separate property, and joint assets that legally required my consent to liquidate. More importantly, Wade didn't know that 3 years of meticulous record-keeping had prepared me for exactly this scenario. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail from Wade. "Michelle, stop being childish. You're overreacting. I was going to leave you some money, but if you're going to be difficult about this, I won't bother. Unfreeze the accounts right now." Leave me some money. How generous of him to consider leaving me a fraction of what was legally mine. A text followed. "This is why I'm leaving you. You're too controlling. Alexis understands me." I took a screenshot of the text and emailed it to my attorney, more evidence of his admission to taking the money. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable to the Michelle of yesterday. I blocked Wade's number. The Michelle of today had work to do, and Wade's tantrum was a distraction I couldn't afford. By the time I left the wine bar at 9 p.m., my contingency plan was fully activated. My attorney would file for divorce and emergency financial orders first thing in the morning. The bank's fraud department had flagged Wade's large transfer and frozen the funds pending investigation. And I had booked a locksmith to change the locks on my house now at 8 a.m. As I drove home, I realized I felt something unexpected relief. The years of suspicion, of second-guessing myself, of pretending not to notice the signs they were over. The uncertainty had been replaced by clarity of purpose. Wade had made his choice, and now I was making mine. I slept surprisingly well that night, alone in the king-sized bed Wade and I had shared for over a decade. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight I could rest knowing I was finally facing the truth. And the truth, painful as it was, had set me free. Wade's first legal threat arrived via email at 10:37 a.m. the next day. By then, I had already met with the locksmith, spoken with my attorney, and opened a new checking account at a different bank. My lawyer will be contacting you about your illegal actions. Wade's email began. Freezing our accounts and changing the locks is a violation of my rights. I demand you reverse these actions immediately or face severe legal consequences. The email went on to claim that the money he'd transferred was primarily his earnings and that he was generously leaving me the house, despite it being an unfair division of assets. He concluded by demanding I unblock his number so we could work this out like adults, instead of getting lawyers involved. I forwarded the email to my attorney without comment. 20 minutes later, Wade showed up at my design studio, his face flushed with anger. My assistant, Jade, intercepted him in the reception area. I'm sorry, sir, but Ms. Reeves is with a client and cannot be disturbed, she said, her voice professional despite the scene Wade was creating. Don't give me that crap, Wade snapped. I know she's hiding back there. Michelle, get out here right now. I stepped out of my office, conscious of my 2 employees and a potential client watching the drama unfold. Wade looked different, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with indignation. We need to talk, he demanded, privately. I agree, I said calmly. Our attorneys can arrange a mediation session next week. Attorneys. He laughed bitterly. Is that how you want to play this after 12 years of marriage? You immediately run to lawyers. After 12 years of marriage. You broke up with me via text message and stole our savings. I replied, my voice steady on. So yes, that's how we're handling this. I didn't steal anything. That money was our joint savings? I interrupted. Money we both contributed to. Money you had no right to take unilaterally. Wade stepped closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. You've made a huge mistake. Michelle, I have leverage you don't know about. Actually, Wade, I think you'll find I know more than you realize. I gestured toward the door. Now, I have a business to run. Please leave before I call security. This isn't over, he warned, glancing around at the witnesses to his outburst. You have no idea who you're dealing with. As he stormed out, my potential client, a prominent cardiologist looking to redesign her lakefront home, approached with raised eyebrows. I'm so sorry you had to witness that, I began, but she waved away my apology. Are you kidding? That was impressive, she said with a knowing smile. My ex tried the same intimidation tactics during our divorce. Standing your ground like that, you've just convinced me you're exactly the designer I need. We shook hands, and I added another client to my roster, an unexpected silver lining to Wade's dramatic appearance. By the end of the day, I'd received 3 more threatening emails from Wade and one from a lawyer whose letterhead I recognized as belonging to a friend of his, not a divorce attorney, but a business associate trying to intimidate me. My own attorney, Vanessa Wong, called with an update. The emergency financial orders have been filed, and we have a temporary hearing date for next week, she explained. The bank has confirmed they're holding the transferred funds until the court makes a determination, and I've sent a cease and desist letter regarding your husband's harassment at your place of business. What about his threat of leverage? I asked. Classic intimidation tactic, Vanessa assured me, but we should prepare for anything. Has he mentioned specific threats? No, just vague warnings about what he could do. Keep documenting everything, she advised. And speaking of documentation, the financial forensics I ran on those records you've been keeping, they're gold. Your husband has been systematically moving money for at least 2 years. Some of the patterns suggest he may have been funding another household. I closed my eyes briefly, even though I'd suspected as much. Having it confirmed still stung. There's more, Vanessa continued. The home equity loan he took out 6 months ago, the one you didn't know about. The paperwork has your signature on it. That's impossible, I said. I never signed anything. Exactly, which means we're looking at potential forgery, a criminal offense. This isn't just a divorce case anymore. Michelle, your husband may have committed fraud. As I hung up, I wondered if this was the leverage Wade thought he had, the idea that exposing financial improprieties would implicate me as well. If so, he'd severely miscalculated. My meticulous record keeping hadn't just protected my assets, it had created a clear timeline showing I wasn't involved in his financial manipulations. Wade had always treated my attention to detail as an annoying personality quirk. Now it was about to become his worst nightmare. 3 days after Wade's text message, I received an unexpected visitor at my home. The doorbell rang just after 7 p.m., and through the security camera, I saw a young woman mid-20s, blonde, athletic build, dressed in expensive athleisure wear, shifting nervously on my porch. When I opened the door, she looked startled, as if she hadn't expected me to answer. "Can I help you?" I asked. "You're Michelle," she said, her voice higher than I'd imagined. Wade's wife. Ah, the mysterious Alexis had arrived. Soon to be ex-wife, I corrected. "And you must be Alexis." She nodded, tucking her hair behind her ear in a gesture that suddenly made her seem very young. "I need to talk to you about Wade." I considered sending her away, but curiosity won out. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Would you like some tea?" Looking relieved, she followed me to the kitchen, perching awkwardly on a bar stool at the island while I filled the kettle. "Nice house," she commented, glancing around. Wade didn't tell me it was so big. "Thank you. I designed most of the interiors myself." I set 2 mugs on the counter. "Now, what about Wade did you want to discuss?" Alexis fidgeted with the sleeve of her jacket. Things aren't what he said they would be." "In what way?" "He told me he was divorcing his wife, you, and that once everything was finalized, we'd buy a condo in Miami. He said he had investments, savings, but now he's saying there are complications, and we need to stay in a hotel while things get sorted out." I couldn't help but laugh. "Let me guess the hotel room is in your name." Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because Wade's credit cards are frozen. His bank accounts are under investigation, and he's facing potential criminal charges for financial fraud. He can't get a hotel room in his name right now." Alexis went pale. "Criminal charges. He said you were trying to steal his money because you were bitter about the divorce." "Did he mention that he initiated this divorce via text message after stealing $275,000 from our joint savings?" He said that was his money from his investments." I sighed, pouring hot water into the mugs. "Alexis, how long have you been seeing Wade?" She looked down at her hands. "About 8 months. But he said you were already separated, that you were just living together until the divorce was final." "We weren't separated," I said gently. "We were very much married until 3 days ago when he texted me that he was leaving." Oh God, she covered her face with her hands. "I'm such an idiot." I slid a mug of tea toward her. "If it helps, you're not the first woman he's lied to." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, according to my attorney's financial investigation, Wade has been funding another household for at least 2 years. Given that we've only been having problems for less than a year, there's someone before me." Alexis looked genuinely shocked. "But he said I was special, that he'd never felt this way before." I felt a surprising pang of sympathy for this young woman who'd fallen for the same charming facade that had once captivated me. "Wade says a lot of things," I noted. "The problem is, most of them aren't true." Alexis took a sip of tea, her hands trembling slightly. "The money. He promised me half of what he took from your accounts. He said it was only fair since I was giving up my apartment and social media business to move with him." "Social media business? Bachini Shian." She nodded. "I'm a fitness influencer. I have about 300,000 followers between Instagram and TikTok. I was building a good income with sponsorships and my workout app. But Wade said I wouldn't need to worry about money once we were together." "And now," I prompted. "Now he's saying I need to wait, that there are legal issues because you're being difficult." She looked up, her expression hardening. "But he's the one being shady. He keeps asking to use my credit cards, saying he'll pay me back double once his situation is resolved." I considered this young woman, barely older than my niece, who'd been manipulated by the same man who'd betrayed me. In another scenario, I might have resented her, the younger woman for whom I'd been discarded. But looking at her now, I saw only another of Wade's victims. Alexis, I said carefully, I think you should know that my attorney believes this Wade committed loan fraud by forging my signature on financial documents. If that's proven, he could face jail time. Her eyes widened. Jail, but he said, I know what he said, I interrupted gently. But I also know what the evidence shows. And I suspect you're starting to see the real Wade Crawford. She was quiet for a long moment. What should I do? It was a loaded question from a virtual stranger, but I found myself wanting to help her avoid further damage. That depends on what you want, I replied. If you want to continue your relationship with Wade, that's your choice. But if you're having doubts, I am, she admitted, especially after coming here. This isn't what he described at all. He made it sound like you were different. I raised an eyebrow. Older, less successful, desperate to keep him. She had the grace to look embarrassed. Something like that. Well, now you've met me. What do you think? Alexis studied me for a moment. I think Wade has been lying to both of us. I nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with this woman who, under different circumstances, I might have hated. There's something else you should consider. If Wade has been moving money illegally, anyone helping him could potentially be implicated. But I didn't know. Intent matters, I agreed. But so does what you do once you do know. Alexis set down her mug, a determined expression replacing her earlier uncertainty. I want to show you something, she said. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her messages, then handed it to me. These are from Wade, from the day he texted you. I scrolled through messages detailing exactly how Wade had planned to transfer money out of our accounts, followed by discussions about using Alexis's credit cards while they sorted out the financial situation. There were even screenshots of our joint account information Wade had no right to share with her. May I forward these to myself? I asked. She nodded. Take whatever you need. I'm done being manipulated. After sending the messages to my email, I returned her phone. Thank you. These will help my case considerably. There's one more thing, Alexis said, her cheeks flushing slightly. I have another income source besides my fitness content. It's an OnlyFans account. Wade doesn't know about it, but it's actually my main income now. I wasn't sure how this related to our situation until she continued. The thing is, Wade subscribed to it 6 months before he approached me on Instagram. He pretended our meeting was coincidental, but he'd been following my content, my adult content, for months. I only discovered this last week when I was checking my subscriber analytics. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still did. Wade, who had criticized my prudish approach to intimacy in recent years, had been secretly consuming explicit content from the woman he was pursuing. Does he know that you know? I asked. She shook her head. I was planning to confront him once we were settled in Miami, but now you're rethinking your plans. I finished for her. Yes, she stood, gathering her jacket. I should go. Wade thinks I'm at a fitness brand meeting, but I needed to see for myself what kind of person you were. And I couldn't help asking. Not at all what he described. She offered a small smile. Thank you for the tea and the reality check. After she left, I immediately called my attorney to relay the new information. Vanessa was ecstatic. The text messages alone are incredibly helpful, she explained. They show intent to defraud. Combined with the forged loan documents and the unauthorized transfers, we have a strong case for financial malfeasance. What about Alexis? I asked. Could she be in trouble for receiving stolen funds? Not if she can show she was unaware of their origin and cooperates with returning any money she received, which it sounds like she's willing to do. She is, I confirmed. I think she's realizing Wade isn't who she thought he was. A realization you came to as well, Vanessa noted, though you were smarter about how you handled it. I thought about that after we hung up. Had I been smarter, or just more calculating, I'd stayed in a marriage I knew was troubled. Documenting evidence instead of confronting the problems directly? Was that wisdom or cowardice? But then I remembered how Wade had ended our 12-year relationship, a text message and a theft. Whatever my failings had been during our marriage, I had never treated him with such callous disregard. And now, ironically, his attempt to discard me had freed me instead. The temporary hearing a week later was brief but consequential. The judge ordered all disputed funds frozen pending full financial discovery, granted me exclusive use of our home, and established temporary support payments from Wade to me based on his income and my needs. Wade, dressed in a suit that looked less crisp than his usual standard, sat stone-faced beside his attorney, a properly qualified divorce lawyer this time, not his business associate playing intimidation games. He didn't look at me during the proceedings, but I could feel his anger radiating across the courtroom. The man who had always prided himself on being in control was watching that control slip away, one court order at a time. After the hearing, his attorney approached mine with a settlement offer. Wade would return 40% of the transferred funds if I dropped my claims about the forged loan documents. Vanessa didn't even need to consult me. My client is entitled to 50% of marital assets at minimum, plus potential damages for the unauthorized transfers and forged documents. We'll proceed with discovery as ordered. As they walked away, I heard Wade hiss to his lawyer, "This is ridiculous. She's just a decorator. I'm the one who made the real money." I smiled to myself. Just a decorator. Wade had always minimized my business success, treating my thriving design firm as a cute hobby rather than the profitable enterprise it was. Another miscalculation on his part. 2 days after the hearing, Alexis texted me, "I moved out of the hotel, going back to my apartment. Thank you for the wake-up call." I wished her well, genuinely hoping she'd find someone worthy of her trust, someone unlike Wade. The full divorce proceedings took 6 months, relatively quick for a high-asset case, but accelerated by the mountain of evidence I'd accumulated and Wade's deteriorating legal position. As the financial investigation deepened, it revealed not just the forged loan documents, but years of questionable transactions and tax maneuvers that had Wade's name all over them. By the end, Wade was facing not only the divorce settlement, but potential criminal charges and IRS penalties. His company, catching wind of the allegations, placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigations. The man who had texted me so cavalierly about emptying our joint account was now watching his entire life implode, his relationship with Alexis over, his career in jeopardy, his finances under scrutiny, and his freedom potentially at risk. Our final divorce settlement awarded me the house, my business free and clear, 60% of our marital assets, including the full amount Wade had attempted to transfer, and ongoing spousal support. Wade received his personal property, his retirement accounts minus my entitled portion, and his increasingly precarious freedom while the DA considered charges. On the day the divorce was finalized, I closed my design studio early and took my team out for champagne. We toasted not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of a new chapter one, where I was fully in control of my destiny. To Michelle, Jade proposed, raising her glass. The most detail-oriented boss in the business, and thank God for that. We laughed, and for the first time in years, my laughter felt completely genuine. There was sadness. Yes, 12 years of my life had been invested in a relationship that had ultimately failed, but there was also immense relief and a growing sense of possibility. That evening, I returned to my house now, legally and emotionally, and wandered through the rooms I had designed with such care. I'd always created spaces that reflected what I thought Wade and I were as a couple: sophisticated, harmonious, successful. Now I could redesign it to reflect who I actually was. I started in the bedroom, rearranging the furniture to my preference rather than the compromise we'd reached years ago. I ordered new bedding in a color Wade had always vetoed as too feminine. I moved his remaining clothes from the closet to boxes for donation, reclaiming the space for myself. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Wade. Using a friend's phone to bypass my block, "You've ruined everything. I hope you're satisfied." I stared at the message, considering how to respond. A year ago, I might have apologized reflexively, tried to soothe his ego, taken on the emotional labor of managing his feelings. Instead, I typed, "I didn't ruin anything. Wade, I simply documented what you did. The consequences are entirely of your own making." Then I blocked this number too and returned to recreating my space. There would be other messages, other attempts at blame and manipulation. But I no longer had to engage with them. I no longer had to make myself smaller to accommodate Wade's ego or pretend not to notice his deceptions. The text that had ended my marriage had ultimately freed me not in the way Wade intended, but in a way that was proving more rewarding than I could have imagined. 6 months after the divorce, my business had expanded to include commercial projects alongside residential work. I'd renovated my home to reflect my personal aesthetic rather than a compromise. I'd reconnected with friends Wade had subtly discouraged and rekindled interest he had dismissed. Wade, meanwhile, had accepted a plea deal on the fraud charges community service and restitution instead of jail time, but a permanent mark on his previously unblemished reputation. His career in financial services was effectively over. Who would trust a financial advisor convicted of fraud? The last I heard, he was living in a rented apartment and working at his friend's car dealership, a significant step down from his executive position and luxury lifestyle. Sometimes I wondered if he ever reflected on how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't sent that text, if he hadn't tried to steal our savings, if he had approached our separation with honesty instead of deception. But mostly, I focused on my own path forward. At 44, I was single, successful, and surprisingly content. The marriage I had clung to out of habit and fear had been replaced by a life built on my own terms, messy sometimes, challenging often, but authentically mine. The text that was meant to end my life as I knew it had instead been the beginning of something better. And that, perhaps, was the most satisfying outcome of all.